The other day, someone asked me to describe my editing process. So I started talking about organizing footage and doing selects, and she said no.
This Michael Kahn quote stays with me for my entire career on YouTube.
I don't cut from what I call knowledge.
The editing is so smart, it's done with intention.
It's so well paced. I never once felt like I needed to speed things up.
Super excited about this video because it's kind of the inspiration for me to consider doing YouTube myself. It's from Every Frame a Painting, very iconic YouTube channel that maybe has done, 12, 13 videos, has over 1 million subscribers. And this one was the first one that I saw because it's kind of what I do, editor, and this is like how editors feel.
Hi, my name is Tony, and this is Every Frame a Painting.
Okay, that right there is so good. I don't know if you guys noticed, but he presses the button and then the music kicks in like right as it clicks. So good.
The other day, someone asked me to describe my editing process. So I started talking about organizing footage and doing selects, and she said no. Your actual process. Like, how do you know when to cut?
So we're going to stop this all the time because it's just so good.
It's good.
It's very simple things of, he's telling the story and he gets to the reversal in the story that he's telling where she's like, no, tell me what your actual process is. And on the no, the footage stops, the music stops, the sound stops. It's just like these little things that are turning what could be just like a rambly story or an information dump into like a narrative experience. Like it stops and suddenly you're drawn in and you want to know more.
And she said, no, your actual process.
And that's what's so amazing and frustrating about this channel. And just it's so good at turning a lesson and an essay into like a narrative, like entertainment experience also.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but nobody has done this type of video before on YouTube. This kind of video essay where I'm like, he really figured out some things about what the video essay should be on his own, or taking the inspiration from what he's seen and translates it into YouTube. And we all, I have to say, there's so many things that I'm copying in all my video essays because of Every Frame a Painting.
It does a very good job of like delivering information in such a way that you're just like, yeah, man, you're absolutely right. Like, I don't know why I didn't see that before, but you're 100% right.
And he's having a conversation with us.
Yes, it really feels that way.
Yeah.
Which is tough, I think, from like a voiceover perspective and a like writing perspective to make it feel like it's not just here's some information about a thing that I like. I also would like to point out, since we're here, that the sound effects are so tactile. I think about this a lot because, when we're editing, it's all clicks and clacks, but the car stops and then he rewinds and it's like a vintage, like tape to tape editing sound effect, not just like a click or like a VHS rewind.
Doing selects, and she said no. Your actual process. Like, how do you know when to cut?
So good.
And I couldn't describe it at all.
And also, like, it's doing it on the moment where it's like stating the thesis, right? It's asking the question of like, this is what this video is about. And so it's drawing all the attention to like, here's what we're going to focus on. And it's just,
and then it cuts to a tape-to-tape editing. It's so good.
And he dropped out the music at the moment when he says, look, the next line is important. So you better listen to this line.
About organizing footage and doing selects. And she said, no. Your actual process. Like, how do you know when to cut?
That's the whole premise of this video.
And I couldn't describe it at all. Like a lot of editors, I cut based on instinct.
Nothing gets in the way of the editing process. It's the process of your thinking. I don't cut from what I call knowledge. I have to come into and I have to feel it.
It's the same way for me. I have to think.
This Michael Kahn quote stays with me for my entire career on YouTube. It's like, how do you express editing? And he says, you don't. Like, I have no idea why I'm cutting things the way that I cut. It's all instinct. And our pursuit is always to figure out how do we communicate why we cut? Why do we make these choices? And how can we teach somebody to cut better? And he's saying, you can't. It's just instinct. And ultimately, it just comes down to doing it really a lot of times. I really love this quote as like one of the outstanding quotes of editors talking about their craft.
The argument that's being made here is that editing is actually about restraint. Like I think when you're first starting out, you feel like a lot of editing is good editing, but really it's like what the moments that you hold on make so much more of an impact than the moments that you cut on.
Well, what I also love is like later in the video they talk about like you can't like teach dancing, right? You have to go and like dance. But I think there is a way that you can direct people to pay attention to certain things. So like when you're editing, yeah, you just have to do it and you'll figure it out. But like pay attention to this while you're editing, pay attention to that. And I feel like that's kind of as much of a teaching thing as you can do is to help direct people where to put their attention while doing this task so that you get better at it in a more productive, efficient way. And I feel like that's what every frame painting does just so well with all these different parts of the filmmaking process is like, just pay attention to this.
Yeah.
Like go do it, but pay attention to this and you'll appreciate it and get better.
Yeah, we're going to get to a point where Tony actually proves this, where he shows you what good editing is and why.
And feel my way through the edit. So today, I'd like to talk about that process. How does an editor think and feel? Consider this scene where Luke Skywalker tests his skill.
This is the scene that I wanted to talk about. This segment here is kind of quintessential editing because it explains why pacing matters. And a lot of people think filmmaking is about the camera, the music, the actors, the script. All true. Script is super important. If you have bad actors, that script can suck, even if it's really, really good. But if you have an editor who doesn't understand pacing and how to make the audience feel, how they can think like the performer is thinking at that moment, you're completely screwed. And there are editors who say that, like Roger Nygaard, who cuts Curb Your Enthusiasm, always says the third most important position in a film is the editor. He says it. I'm not saying that. But he said it's the writer, it's the director, it's the editor. If one of them sucks, the movie's going to suck. And here's why.
To make this simpler, let's just focus on how long each shot is held for. Notice that as we build, each shot gets shorter and shorter towards the climax.
I know this isn't the point, but I would just like to take a moment to appreciate all of the like practical effects in Star Wars. Like it all looks so good. Like the miniatures and the puppets, it's great.
But after 5 shots, we hit the peak and start coming down. Not only are the shots getting longer again, they're actually held for longer than they were the first time. And this whole sequence spends about 15 seconds going up, but twice that amount coming down, so that we, the audience, have time to feel Luke's failure.
I can't. It's too big.
But what happens if you shorten this timing? Let's take a look at a very similar scene, done more recently. See if you can feel the difference.
You can do it, Scott. Come on.
They're not listening to me.
Did you believe that emotion? Because in this scene, Scott's failure took 30 frames.
You just watch this when you teach somebody editing, say, okay, this is what editing is. And I think a lot of people will really like it turns a light on for them to understand what the power is, this invisible art, what it really can do to a film. And I don't think that the editor or the director were thinking, oh, we need to start off with like 5 seconds and then it gets faster and faster. And then at the end, we need to like have it 9 seconds on him. They just felt that. They just like really tried to figure out what will the audience feel. And the editor is kind of the ambassador of the audience. They get to shape that emotion and they get to decide for the most part. I mean, it's ultimately the director who says, yes, great, or do more. But they kind of make all these decisions to really define what the rhythm of a scene is. And I mean, how did you feel about the other film, the Ant-Man film? Like, it feels so empty after seeing this.
It's comical almost. Yeah. In this comparison between Empire Strikes Back and Ant-Man, they're showing the sort of like I think one of the challenges with editing is that a lot of it isn't intuitive, and so you might be working with a director or producer that's like, this is too long, I want this like scene, this movie needs to move faster, And that's not how like movies and time work, where sometimes something that is literally shorter can feel longer because it feels emptier and you're not as engaged. Like it was less engaging to watch the Ant-Man scene, even though it was a third of the time, than it was to watch the Empire Strikes Back scene. And I feel like this is just doing a really good job of like making someone who isn't, as you're saying, conscious of these aspects of editing, like bringing that to awareness that like it doesn't have to be a literal make it shorter or longer to make it feel that way. It's a much more complicated, intuitive process.
Yeah, I really love Marvel movies, so I, take offense.
I do
to
too.
The Ant-Man slander.
To be clear, I love Marvel movies.
No, yeah, I love them too. But it is fascinating how so much of the Star Wars scene takes place with just looks. It's just one character looking at another or like looking at the ship. And in the Ant-Man scene, they do the same thing, but I think the reason that you don't feel it is because like you don't see Paul Rudd getting frustrated. He's just like focusing and then immediately is frustrated, which I imagine goes back to what you were saying, where it's like, okay, the scene, it's working, but it needs to move a little faster. So like, where do you cut things out? And, I could see from an editing perspective where you're like, oh, okay, really all you need to tell this story is like him being frustrated. So maybe you could take out, some air there.
Ultimately, I feel like the point and what's cool about this video essay is not, I don't think it's an objective measure of either of those.
Yeah.
It's a really good, like, look at this thing in isolation, look at this thing in isolation. And by comparing them, you get the bigger thing that we're talking about. And so in a lot of ways, I don't even read it as a judgment of either of the movies, but just like a really good, here's a juxtaposition so you understand what we're talking about.
For sure. Yeah, you feel the contrast. And I don't think he's saying that one movie is necessarily better than the other.
Yeah,
but
you make a very good point, actually.
Yeah.
We should stick to that. We shouldn't polarize.
And if the movie doesn't give it to us, we don't believe it.
And I'm finding in movies recently that I've seen a lot of things I don't believe. I think people are sticking stuff out there and asking you to believe it, but they're not making you believe it.
Dama Schoonmaker, rockstar editor. She was a rockstar editor because she's won 3 times the amount of Oscars that Martin Scorsese has won.
Wow.
And they've worked together for decades. And she is really one of the iconic editors that is just ruthless when it comes to editing and emotion. Like if you watch another movie like Wolf of Wall Street.
What I call them? Fun coupons. See that? A fun coupon.
You watch it frame by frame, cut by cut.
It's so good. And it moves. You don't
It does.
feel the 3 hours.
Yeah, but if you judge continuity editing, and a lot of beginning editors is like, I'm trying to make this work. Like I'm trying to make this hand matched in the wide shot to the small, and it's like the different hand where the cigarette is holding or so. None of that matters to her. When you watch Wolf of Wall Street, almost every cut is like, there's no continuity. It's all emotion. And she's only really throwing energy at you. And you're just so engrossed with what's happening that you don't notice any of that.
The Departed is one of my favorite movies. For that reason, there's just so much like momentum, and the camera's gonna like dolly in and zoom in, and we're cutting like 3 times in between. Such that it almost feels like it's all a seamless experience. She can do fast editing, slow editing, all of it to just preserve the kind of emotional like roller coaster ride, and it almost like bombards you such that you can't even process it like in a logical way. It's just all, like you're saying, emotion. It's just like you're on the ride and feeling it.
Just washes over you.
So good.
Yeah. I think your point about like continuity editing is so interesting, because I was listening to a podcast with Bill Hader, who was talking about like movies that he loves and how much stuff like that doesn't matter. Like there's all these rules that you're supposed to learn, or like, what if a shot misses focus? Like, should that be in the movie? And I think back in like the 70s and 80s, they were a lot more forgiving. Like you wouldn't think about any of that stuff, because if it worked emotionally, like that was what was important. And I think now there is such an emphasis on things being like so perfect. I don't think that either way of doing it is worse, but it is interesting how much you can get away with when like what you're focusing on is the emotion and the audience doesn't notice.
Editors do like craft the performance, like there's so much like control and power that they have. And I think what's also interesting, like you were talking about the difference between modern films and old films, is like there is so much control now with digital technology that's happened over the past 30 years and like splitting a take. David Fincher's famous for like the left side of the frame is one take, the right side is other take. And that's really cool, but then also like it comes with trade-offs. And so thinking about that Ant-Man example again, as opposed to the Yoda where it's a real puppet and it's emoting and performing a thing over time and you're reacting to a thing that exists. If you're looking at a blank image of where a CGI ant might be, there isn't that timing or performance to get a feel for and react to. And that's what like Tony and Taylor talk about in this video is like the pacing that exists within a shot and how do you react to that. And so when you're not reacting to it and you have to create it out of thin air and something like this or a video game, it's like a whole other challenge. And it's just really interesting how technology changes and the craft, we're still after the same thing, but different challenges and obstacles arise.
I'm going to take another detour and go back to continuity editing.
Yeah.
I cut a movie and that's that Sundance movie with Mark Webber that he directed. And there's a scene in there where he's wearing a jacket and I cut to another shot and he's not wearing the jacket. Neither him or I ever noticed it. And we've seen the cut hundreds of times until we just randomly at some point like just paused on this shot and the other one was like in the preview. We're like, something's off. And that's the only time we noticed that the continuity is completely off because emotionally it always worked. And we decided not to change it. Like we kept it as is.
That's fascinating.
If editing is so instinctive, how do you learn it? I only know one way. Practice.
And editing is very similar to dance in that way. You can explain the rudiments of dance, but to really learn how to dance, you have to dance.
He gets such great quotes.
And as you cut, you'll develop a sense of rhythm and emotion that's unique to you. I've been doing it for 10 years, and I'm still not there. But whenever I'm frustrated by an edit, I think about something Michael Kahn said.
The beautiful thing about editing is, I guess maybe writers feel that way, I see all that film up there, it doesn't matter. I'm doing one piece at a time. One scene at a time, one cut at a time. When there's a lot of film, I just do one thing at a time.
So take it one shot at a time. Because if you watch any image,
Do it again.
you'll see it has an emotion and a rhythm.
Such a great performance.
And you have to feel when to.
Great way to end the video, too. It's such a flex.
Yeah, and these are the hero editors that I think we kind of now look up to. Walter Murch. I mean, the number one book to read when you want to learn editing is In the Blink of an Eye. So that's kind of why I really wanted to show this part of this video as well, to really point out that even though that book is kind of old school and it's talking about like how it used to be, the concepts are so important and it's so eye-opening for many people. Like I have so many people on the YouTube channel always tell me, you recommended this $10 book and it just completely changed my view on editing. And now I have a different point of view on how powerful it is.
Do you think this video changed how you think when you're editing?
It started this process. I think YouTube in general, just being on that platform and creating videos helped me so much in my editing, just because I had to cut a lot, but also I had to reflect on it more. While before I wasn't. And so, yeah, I think it's the beginning of that.
I'm going to talk briefly about the editing of this video essay and just the structure of it. And so obviously Lessons from the Screenplay, my channel was like hugely influenced by Every Frame a Painting. And one of the things, every time I would watch an Every Frame a Painting video, I'd feel this like emotion in me. And I was like, what am I feeling? Jealousy. That's what it is. I am jealous of how good this is.
Same.
But largely because the editing is so smart, it's done with intention. It's not just, I'm going to slap B-roll on top of whatever I'm saying and let it play. It's choosing the moments. It's editing the B-roll even to what's being said. And the writing and the structure of it, like I think there's a reason why these were called video essays, is because there is this sort of thesis that's set up as broken into like chunks of different arguments. Earlier during the Ant-Man example, it sort of asks a question of like, pay attention to like pacing and duration. And so it introduces the idea, it shows us the examples, and then it wraps up that idea and like reinforces the lesson essentially. And I just have such appreciation for that. And even you were talking about how it uses the music earlier.
So I started talking about organizing footage and doing selects, and she said, no, your actual process.
again, a lot of video essays, I think, they just drop a lo-fi beat behind it and just let it play and like, yeah, it's doing music.
And
but
it's all like B-roll of like movies without anything specific.
Right. But like we were talking about, like Taylor and Tony, they stop the music. They use the music of the video essay to help like accentuate the point they're making. And that's something I would often try to do in my videos is like, when am I using what music track? Because I think switching music tracks can signal subconsciously to the viewer like, oh, we're on to a different topic now. Like,
Absolutely.
I don't need to hold the same thing in my head as I was a few seconds ago. And so just even thinking about just the amount of work and planning and just everything that went into all of these videos is like, it's still really inspiring to me to like watch and appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as somebody who makes videos kind of similar to this, I feel like it's so well paced. You know, I watch a lot of YouTube on 2x speed because I just feel like people either talk too slow or like when they're going through examples, it's not fast enough. But this one, I think it like is so well paced. I never once felt like I needed to speed things up. And I think that's really challenging because I'm sure you guys know when you're sitting and watching a video that you wrote and are editing and it's like the 100th time to make sure that like, you know, this frame doesn't have anything wrong with it. It's so easy to feel like, oh, we're spending too much time on this example here. Like I imagine the Star Wars thing probably felt like so long. Like the 5th time you watched that video, I'm sure it felt so long.
Notice that as we build, each shot gets shorter and shorter towards the climax.
But he like perfectly takes his time with the video so that when you watch it, you're like, oh yeah, I get that thing and I don't feel like you overstayed your welcome. And I think that's a really difficult thing to do in an edit for a visual essay like this.
If you guys haven't read it, when they sort of ended the channel, they posted like the blog post that like breaks down the process, and it's so great, and it's full of lessons. And I think a lot of the things that like often pacing problems that people try to correct with like cut faster, make it move, it's a writing problem. It's a structural narrative problem. And so that's something I would do in my videos a lot is like I'd write a first draft and I'd start to make it and I'd be like, this is terrible, this is bad, it needs to be rewritten. And so you edit it and you go back and reassemble it and write it better once you know what you're doing, and that fixes most of the problems. And they talk about in that blog post how much research and time spent writing and practicing the voiceover. Like they do a really thorough job in the preparation and the pre-production, and I think that's what then allows you to have fun with the post and like really bring the thing to life because the foundation is so strong.
I'm also jealous, totally am. And I'm jealous of the preparation that they do because I know that's not my strong point. Like I like to do things, explore them, just do it. What gives me hope and courage with this channel is like if you go back and you watch the first few videos, you can see that there's a progression. Like they weren't perfect right out of the gate, and it took them a while to figure this out. And once they hit it, they set the bar, and it's very hard to get over that bar. I can't think of any video that I made that gets close to that bar. But I think for them also, and that's sort of what I got from the blog, is like the bar was so high, if they can't match it, there's no point in making a video, and that's why they stopped. And that's a little sad, I think.
Tense.
Yeah, that's rough. But I think that you have made such great videos, and I think the thing that is like behind this is like the passion for filmmaking. And I think a lot of your videos explore that really well. So I would give yourself more credit. I think you do make a lot of great videos.
Yeah, it's more instinctive, like Mike O'Connor. Just throw it out there, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
And there's something to be said, like you were saying that they plan a lot and you feel like you don't do that. But like we were saying before, like editing is also writing. Like it's very much
it's a
all
process
part
of discovery.
Yeah.
It's like that's part of the fun is you throw it on the timeline and ideas come to you.
And I think it's so important to know when you're watching something back in the timeline, like where things don't work, where you are getting bored, and like doing something about that as opposed to just being like, if you just give it like 5 more seconds and you get to the part where it actually matters. And I think this one is so, it's so tight. You don't feel that ever. Like every moment matters.
I think that's why it's so important to watch your stuff with somebody, like get an audience, like, because I'll be like in a flow and be like, this is great, I love it, like I'm an awesome editor, I'm so good. And then I'll just like sit someone down to like watch it and like give me feedback on this, and as soon as I hit play, I'm thinking about it from their perspective. I'm like, oh my god, this is awful, I can't believe I need to go change everything. And so those reality checks are very important to the process.
Well, thank you guys. This is the perfect video for me if I'm doing this. I wouldn't want to pick another video. So thank you for you guys for watching this and the enthusiasm that you have for this as well.
Excellent choice.
Yeah, it's a perfect video.